I'm Kimberly George, the president of the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation. And today we have the wonderful opportunity to have a conversation with guest Dalene Bartholomew. And we're going to get into the whole topic here in a minute, but I want to kick off by thanking our sponsors. And while I don't have a sponsor slide today, as those of you who follow the Alliance know, without our sponsors, we simply would not be. These sponsors support the Alliance not for the marketing purposes, not because they need to sell to our followers, but more so because they believe in our mission. So Amitros, the Best Claims Solution, Broadspire, Concentra, Delta Group, MedRisk, One Call Optum, Paradigm, Prime Health, Safety National, and Sedgwick, Shearwater, Inlight, ISG, and MES Solutions. What a wonderful group of sponsors, and we're so thankful for all of you. So today, as I said, I've got Dalene with me. Dalene, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you so much, Kimberly. It's so great to be here. I recently joined ALC Claims Collaborations, where I am their COO, and I oversee our workers' compensation claims auditing, oversight, and settlement divisions, as well as development of corporate growth and client relationships. I previously was an executive in the claims investigation and insurance fraud space, where I was a co-owner of Probe Information Services for about a dozen years. So I enjoy volunteering and serving on boards. I love to engage provocative thought and learning in others. I've presented at over 300 industry conferences and events. Let's see, I'm originally from Sacramento, California. My wife and I have been residing for the past 3 years in Manhattan, New York. And we're excited to be relocating next month to Santa Barbara, California.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, part of why Dalene's with us today is because it is Pride Month. And when I met Dalene, we actually met through the Alliance. Dalene is an applicant for an ambassador position. And she said in her application and was very open in the interview, I'm a lesbian and I want to give back to the industry. And she was really so forthright with early learnings or experiences rather from being a lesbian in the workplace, and it just touched my heart. You know, as we allies want to support underrepresented, and certainly the Alliance is on their DEI journey, I thought, what a great opportunity, because people aren't always open with who they are, and as an ally, I really want the opportunity not just for people to have a safe place at the Alliance, but let's talk about this. And since you were so open, I reached out and said, hey, will you join me for a fireside chat? So thanks so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be sharing this information.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to learn together, and at the Alliance where it's really about supporting one another. It's really a gift you're giving to all of us. But before we get into your personal story, I'd love to know what Pride means to you.
Absolutely. So Pride Month, I mean, as we know, sort of commemorates the Stonewall riots, which, occurred back in June of 1969. It's actually born a few months later. So when I think about Pride, I have a lot of gratitude around those who had the courage to fight and march during those times. And then as a teenager in the 1980s, I went to a Pride parade in San Francisco, and it was the first time that I witnessed people just really expressing themselves and how they kind of wanted to be in their self-identity and their partner choice. And that was really impactful, because I was struggling with who I was as a lesbian. Mm-hmm. I wanted to feel pride despite what anyone else thought. But at that time, there was not a safe space for me. So I did not come out to even my family until I was in my late 20s. And
okay.
it didn't go very well. And so, that rejection's really hard to overcome. And, for, the coming out process for the LGBTQ community is one of the scariest and most difficult experiences. And you sort of face that fear of rejection for something you don't have any control over. And it took me years to fully have sort of a sense of pride for who I am and to show up as my authentic self as a lesbian. And so now pride means that I celebrate who I am, and that pride celebration of love and acceptance and promotion of equality and visibility and justice. And I would say now that pride really also has come to mean allyship.
Yeah.
To include in that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think that the way you described it on your own journey and what it means to you today is, whether we have our LGBTQ plus community watching and they say, yeah, that's my story too. Or for those of us who truly do want to know, what's pride mean? I talked to my teenage daughter about this. Oh, she's 21 now, not a teenager. But when she started going to Pride, saying, what's it mean? Because it's a fun parade to some, and yet it's got such deep meaning. And so I know even as a family, we explored that quite a bit, and to hear from you. And I do think it's an important time for us as allies to learn more, whether it's Black History Month, Pride Month, as we're all trying to advance our own DEI journeys and learn. Yeah. So why don't you share a little bit about early in your career and how it was for you?
Oh my gosh. So back in the early 90s, when I decided I wanted to be an investigator. So I went to sit for an exam with the state of California to get my license. And on that day, they were also doing an exam for others licensing. They had security guards, pawn shop owners, vehicle repossession licenses. There was about 200 people taking exams, and I was the only female in the room. And I became a licensed investigator, and in the late 90s, I went to my first insurance fraud conference. There was about 300 fraud investigators in attendance, and there were 4 of us that were women. So this kind of continued on my journey. There just were very few women in the investigation and fraud industry. And so my first 20 years in that industry, I never met anyone who was out as gay or lesbian, and that included me. So, in an environment where I didn't see, anyone who looks like me or was going through my same sort of struggles, that was challenging. And I know that there's a lot of underrepresented people who can relate to that. And, I remember clearly the off-colored comments and jokes that were told in front of me and the derogatory terms that were used. And it was a challenging time. It could feel very lonely, and it was very demeaning experience for me because I felt like I had to lie. Who I loved.
Yeah. It's, as you were saying that, it's not just about it is about having more underrepresented people. It is, but it also is about feeling safe, it sounds like, and being able to be part of the team. If they're actually, saying derogatory things, and it's a whole nother layer.
Exactly. That's exactly both things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And then tell us how that was early. Did you continue, or have you continued to feel sort of those challenges, or whether it's your age and some of the maturity or more confidence that comes with it, or society or your company advancing? How did that journey sort of progress?
Well, I would, and to be honest, it's my recent career change in joining ALC Claims Collaborations that actually marks the first time that I'm 100% comfortable in the workplace and being my authentic self as a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And at 52 years old and having worked most of my entire career in California, that's really saying something.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember, early in my career, it was sort of during the AIDS epidemic, and there was all this misinformation and fear and prejudice. And, there was no protections for gay people. We could be fired for being gay. And so it wasn't until around 2005, and I became an executive at Probe Information Services, which was an investigative firm. And that was the first time I came out to just my colleagues, my team. They were great, but I still totally remained closeted with all of our clients. And, that was a difficult role for me because I was client facing. But I couldn't risk losing clients because of who I was. And there was, in a tough environment, in 2008, Prop 8 came onto the scene. And so, this was the ballot measure in California to ban same-sex marriage. And so there was this whole discussions around this. And, I could visually see my neighbors and businesses that were against same-sex marriage, as evidenced by the thousands of signs that were displayed. But clients were also very vocal on this issue, and they were supporting the ban on same-sex marriage, and they were proudly contributing to the campaign. And so that just made me recede sort of further in that closet. And, I always felt so terrible when people would ask me things like, so what does your husband do?
Yeah.
And I would vague or change the subject, but sometimes I would just have to lie. But I couldn't risk losing those clients because it wasn't about me. It was about, we had employees who depended on those relationships for our livelihood. So it's just been recently, Kimberly, that I have really just been able to be myself. And because it's even in just the past few years, I have experienced homophobia and prejudice. So it has been a journey.
I admit my ignorance in this, because I guess somebody like myself who wants to learn, wants to be an ally, and who, if I were to hear somebody say, oh, Dalene, what about your husband? I would likely say, oh, she's got a wife.
Yeah.
And she's this, and this. And that to me is being an ally. But I admit that while I thought I was an ally a long time, and it's a journey for all of us,
yes.
As you were saying, 2008, and my heart was sinking because I was thinking about my gay and lesbian friends, and was I supportive enough during that time? Because I know in my heart I would have wanted to, but am I? And that leads me to just this thought, and I'd like your comments on it, Dalene, but for our audience, to be open and ask, because when I reached out to Dalene to say, would you have this interview with me? I was taking a risk. She could say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Or just because I told you I was a lesbian doesn't mean I want to get on a video and share more of this. But Dalene, how would people like myself or others, when it's somewhat of an uncomfortable situation, but our heart's in the right place, how would you suggest we go about and be an ally and engage? Sort of what's that mean to you, and how might we be better at it?
Well, we need our allies so much now. And so I feel like people like you that have that willingness to step up and have that good intent to want to support us, I think we feel that. And so you don't have to be perfect or say the perfect things or I think as long as there's just that conversation, you're willing to have that hard conversation. that's what matters is that you're, aware, paying attention and asking how we're doing. For years, I don't feel like there was a lot of people who sort of had our backs. And so now to have people like you and other allies who are stepping up saying, we care about how you're feeling, and, and are we doing the right thing, or how can we support you? Those things are so important. You can't even imagine how much better and how much safer it feels. And, for so long, we look at, youth and how hard it is for them to come out. And I know that there's a lot of young people struggling and that probably don't feel like they have someone, and what a difference even just one ally can make. It's a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to be your authentic self when some people say and feel it's how I show up with my hair today, or can I be in a ponytail, or can I use the accent of the community with which I'm, from, or does my drawl impact? Or for me, if I'm in a board meeting in New York, the way I dress is very different if I'm in the Bay Area with private equity. I mean, we do have to adjust and flex. And I just want to stress that that's not the same in any way of being your authentic self, the way Dalene has told us. And I'm saying that, Dalene, because we've spent a lot of time on authenticity this year at the Alliance and talking about being your authentic self. And so one size does not fit all.
It's true.
Yeah, yeah. And so you would, just to expound upon this topic for a minute, you said to take the risk, to engage in the conversation, and it's okay if you say something not quite right. How do you feel about that? Because I mean, at a deeper level, because I think many will say to me, but I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Absolutely. I think we're always, kind of afraid of maybe misstating or potentially offending someone, or, and these are delicate conversations. These are tough. And so any of us walking into a tough conversation, I think, maybe would hesitate. And allyship, it's still evolving, right? So, I think that it's, I think as long as we sort of approach it with the goal of sort of saying, I want to help. I want to advocate for these underrepresented employees. I want people to feel safe and welcome and appreciated and equal.
Yeah.
And, and so you're having these tough conversations, and we're listening, and we're listening to understand. And I think that's really the key. I think that, is that human aspect will make it more real for people who may not understand that not all employees experience it the same way, but that we need to bring everyone along. And, and like so many times in life, it's important to meet people where they are, whether we're the lesbian or we're the ally. Like, we're all just kind of showing up and doing our best. And I think that's a great place to start.
Yeah, really, really good perspective. Thank you for that. So you're married. How long have you been married?
Oh my gosh. So my wife, Susan, and I, we've been together for 20 years. And so, we after, a few years after we fell in love, we thought, gosh, it'd be great to get married, but that wasn't an option. So we registered as domestic partners. And then a couple of years after that, we thought, gosh, it'd be really great to get married, and it still wasn't legal. And so we went to Canada and we got married, and it was lovely. And so in our hearts, we were married, but not so much in the eyes of the law. And then in 2008, this really weird thing happened in California. The Supreme Court said the ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. And there was this window where California issued licenses to same-sex partners. So we ran down to City Hall in San Francisco and we got married. And then just weeks later, Prop 8 passed and the ban on same-sex marriage went into effect, and same-sex couples were not allowed to get married in California again for 5 more years.
5 years.
We were in this little window of time where there was a few of us, and then we thought they were going to take away the marriage license, but they didn't. They said no, it held. But it was this really strange time because so we were married in the state of California, but not federally. So like if you're completing a form on a passport, they ask, are you married? Well, you're not married. If you're filing taxes, we had to file married in the state of California, but file single and separate for the federal form. We carried powers of attorney with us everywhere because we had no rights to sort of make medical decisions for each other. I mean, so it's this really weird time.
Yeah.
But yes, if we're married, yes, we have 3 anniversaries every year. Yes. we're so married.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful and it's special. It really hits home that those of us that aren't a lesbian or gay and don't have a family member that shared this with us, and I have plenty of married same-sex couple friends in California who, by the way, have never shared this with me of some of the complexity. Wow. Well, legal now.
Yes, legal now. It's all good. There is this concern, over the current Supreme Court and, with them potentially overturning abortion rights, it leaves the LGBTQ, advocacy groups a little fearful that they're going to target, gay marriage and other landmark civil rights rulings. But
yeah. Well, it brings awareness to all of us who need to, want to, and can support going forward. So thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And does your wife know that you're having this fireside chat today?
She does. She thinks it's fabulous, actually.
Yeah. Well, I bet so, especially knowing what you've gone through in your career and this excuse me, your job change where you can show up as your authentic self. And that has to have been hard on her as well, knowing that this pressure you've had in your career, which in part because of your love of her, I'm sure it really has hurt her heart for a lot of years then. Yeah.
That is true because we, our struggles, we feel them for each other. And,
for each other. Yeah. Well, tell her congrats as well. And really, really happy you were willing to share your story. Let's go back to that early and younger Dalene, the experiences you have had. And what advice do you have for others that may be younger in their career or haven't been able to find a role where they can be their authentic self? Just open up and give us some of your thoughts. I'm sure it's a lot, but if you can give us some ideas on how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that one of the biggest early struggles was that, that sort of just lack of sense of belonging in the industry. And so now, I look and I'm really grateful there are, there's organizations such as the Alliance in Women in Work Comp and the Rainbow Risk Alliance and other alliances and things that are, specific to the Hispanic and Black communities, and all that's really good. So my advice would be, find support, find that sense of belonging. Maybe it's joining one of the groups or building your tribe or even just having one trusted ally. I mean, all that really makes a difference. So that's my biggest piece of advice is nobody wants to go it alone. And I'd say my other big piece of advice is to vote.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's interesting to me, Dalene, and I know I mentioned earlier how happy I was that in your application and in our conversation, you referenced that you were a lesbian. And I find that people don't always share that. And so I wouldn't go ask, are you heterosexual? Are you... and maybe that's erroneous on my part, but how can the Alliance or those of us that want to create inclusive teams and workplaces and even within our community, is it is it best that we just don't ask, or are there ways we can make the LGBTQ community more comfortable to share? I know that's tough, it's so personal, but do you have any advice?
Well, I think it's what you're doing is perfect. You're putting out that we're welcome, we're inclusive, that we celebrate diversity. You're making it known that we want you to come as yourself. We want you to come and share with us who you are and share with us your journey, your whole thing. I think, whether, you're a big corporation or you're a small business or you're an association, whatever, just to sort of put out that message that, this is who we are. This is our culture. This is our philosophy, and all are welcome here. And we want to hear from you. And then if people choose to share it, then they know that's a safe place. And then they see other people, walking that walk too. And so then that becomes really contagious, and it makes us feel very supported and welcome.
Yeah. Well, at the Alliance, we sure are on our DEI journey. And while we don't tout ourselves as a DEI organization, obviously we were founded on diversity with women. And as we built our following, really found that as an organization and our followers individually, our DEI journeys could advance together, even at a different pace. And so, you're a part of that, Dalene. I'm so thrilled you're not only doing this today, but supportive of the Alliance and helping all of us as an industry, workers' compensation, generally speaking, but insurance and risk management, become more comfortable. We talk DEI, but as you've said a few times, some of these conversations are uncomfortable. So I tell people, the more you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, the better we all are, because this to me was really comfortable today. Some of what I heard hurt my heart, but such a great conversation. You made it incredibly easy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated and enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And to our followers, if you haven't had a chance to listen to the interview I had and we shared last week with Tamara Corbin, one of the co-founders of the Rainbow Risk Alliance that Dalene just referenced, please check it out and go support Pride. We still have some time this month. Take care, and thanks again, Dalene.
Thank you, Kimberly.